Salud.
Thank you for having me, man.
No. I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate your time. We did the calendar invite. We
I
did
know, right?
the professional way.
It's the only way to do it, man.
I know, right? Like before, I never used to use the calendar
Me
stuff.
neither. Now, if it's not in the calendar, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, for real. Dude. Like now, like and every cell phone, I put on like for every. I have to put it on because then like I'll ask my girl to like, what do we have this Sunday or what do we have this day, and I'll check my calendars and like, all right, we're good for that day. But yeah, man. So tell me about who you are, bro. First of
Awesome, man. Well, I'm Jesus Iniguez. I'm a co-founder of Back of the Arts Coffee.
Okay.
Born and raised in Back of the Arts. The company's been around for 6 years now. We started in 2016.
Oh wow.
Going on 7 now, actually in May. We started from the ground up, literally with no money. I wouldn't advise anybody to do that way.
Yeah.
But we were very blessed to have a lot of support from the community, and which allowed us to actually have some successes. But yeah, we started from scratch. Literally opened up the shop because, quite frankly, there just wasn't one in the neighborhood.
Right.
And we wanted to enjoy good coffee.
Yeah.
I was tired of having to drink burnt lattes from Dunkin' Donuts because that's all we had there.
Yeah.
Or travel long distances, to access good coffee. So
to get decent coffee.
Yeah.
Or good coffee. So let's start from the beginning, bro. Where were you born?
So I was born in Back of the Arts, born and raised on 44th and Hermitage, across street from the park. My family migrated from Jalisco.
Okay.
All my older siblings were born in Guadalajara, and they moved to Chicago in the winter of 78, 79. So they got the famous blizzard.
Yeah.
They went from a hot, 60 to 80, 60 to 90 degree median temperature year round to, below zero and a snowstorm. All my siblings were between 3 and 12 years old. And yeah, they arrived in Chicago, and then a couple years later, I was born.
Yeah.
In Back of the Arts, and I've been there ever since.
Really? So you're the youngest?
I'm the second youngest. So then my parents had an accident with my little sister, who's not so little. Well, she's not so little in age anymore, but she's still little in in height. But she's 9 years younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was it growing back? How was it growing up back in Back of the Arts back then compared to now?
So it's interesting because I grew up in the 90s, so it was probably the most violent period in Back of the Arts. Like right now, a lot of people, they still regard Back of the Arts as a violent community. There is violence, in the neighborhood, but it's not something I think defines us.
Right.
But in the 90s, it was crazy.
Yeah.
I remember learning, the difference between, when you hear gunshots.
Right.
The difference between, well, first of all, learning the difference between firework and a gunshot.
Yeah.
And then the difference between a gunshot that hits something or that, it's in the air, knowing that you needed to drop instead of run.
Right.
I grew up playing, baseball, soccer, and basketball in Davis Square Park.
Yeah.
And that was basically where all the gangbangers hung out.
Right.
Many of them I grew up with. And so whenever there was any drive-bys, oftentimes I was in the middle of it. We were out in the street, especially in the summer, from the morning, the minute I woke up till at night when, mom was calling,
Right. Well, how did you stay out of that trouble, or did you?
Well, I think I was more afraid of my dad and my brothers.
Yeah.
My brother stayed out of it. Honestly, I think that's probably the reason why.
Yeah.
There was, I think because we grew up together and, my brothers were able to avoid it. There was respect. I think a lot of the older gangbangers, they respected my family.
Yeah.
And it was mutual respect. Like they didn't mess with us, we didn't mess with them.
Right.
And so when I started to kind of get of age, I just was too busy. I honestly, I could have, I was always rebellious, and so the opportunity was certainly there. But I think the biggest thing for me was there was people in organizations that invested time and money into the neighborhood youth, and at that period in time, it was just all the different institutions working together with the right people, bringing the right resources. I think that's what saved me, and many of my peers that are of my age. Freddie.
Yeah. Like what programs was it? Were they?
So this was really the church, and not the church as an institution, but really a priest and a nun there. Former priest and former nun.
Yeah.
Bruce and Angie, who really used the institution of the church to access resources, and instead of kind of like working in a silo and just doing the things the church does,
right?
They really figured out that the way to work through the violence was working with the neighborhood youth, whether it be through programs in the park and working with the park, or with the schools. They eventually started an organization called the Peace and Education Coalition, which is still in existence. And it started just as a consortium of all the institutions, whether it was schools, parks, libraries, even CPD, all the institutions and the nonprofits that touched the lives of the families that were living there. And they basically communicated to know be able to follow how we're progressing, right? Even the court system. We had therapy sessions which we didn't know what that was. We just showed up for the pizza, and and it was called Reflections. And I remember, we were part of this group, and we would just talk, and we just went for the pizza, but we ended up kind of releasing, our thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
That organization started giving scholarships to neighborhood youth. I was a recipient of that. Many of my peers were. And then they also started 2 alternative high schools, which helped young people from the community get their high school diploma because they couldn't leave for whatever reason the neighborhood. And it really started to build that responsibility of community in us.
Yeah.
We've all kind of stayed connected to the neighborhood. And I think that's what's really got me to start my business in the community and really stay there, whether I'm living there or whether I'm, contributing as an employer, as a small business. I'm not alone. There's, Freddie, for example, who manages property in the community. They provide housing, right? That's so essential in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
We have a psychologist who's a friend of ours who works with youth in the community. We have doctors, we have attorneys, we have artists, people who somehow or another, even those who have left. And we have a friend of ours that grew up with us, Jose Alonso, who now lives in Oregon. He still contributes to he's on the board of the Marimba Institute, which is providing music and will be providing lessons in music for the community. So, I think for me, it's Bruce and Angie really, and other adults that kind of came and went, really instilled that responsibility of community, no matter what, you do in life, whether, you're going to business or, or you're professional or you're a laborer. At the end of the day, we still somehow give back to the community, whether it's our time or our money or both.
Yeah. Do you think? Well, of course, it's important to give back to the community. Do you think if they weren't around, do you think you guys would have still had that that in you to give back as much to the community?
Honestly, probably not.
No.
I don't. I think that's the thread that holds us all together. Because I think I remember as a kid, like one of the things that I always wanted was, I grew up my entire life in an apartment, even though my parents owned the building.
Yeah.
It was 4 units, 3 bedroom and 2 bedrooms, small bathrooms, small rooms. I just wanted out. That whole like living in the suburbs, was alluring, because we would visit, some of my parents' friends or family members, who had a yard. Like our backyard was all cement, and it wasn't a yard. It was just block of cement. And the front, honestly, we were lucky to have a park. Otherwise, we'd be stuck inside all day and the stress that causes.
Yeah.
I remember wanting to move out of the neighborhood, not because of the neighborhood per se, but because, that suburban life was alluring, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then growing up, they little by little they just instilled that pride in the neighborhood. Whenever we complained about things that weren't being done, they're like, "Well, what are you waiting for? You do it. You get it started."
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we did. That's how we started the business. And for 20 years, we're like, why is nobody open up a coffee shop in the neighborhood?
Right.
Well, you do it. And I
yeah.
did.
So where did you go to high school, or where did you go to school there?
So for the same reason, trying to leave the neighborhood, like I ended up going to Kennedy High School.
Okay.
Here, not too far from Summit, but on 55th and Narragansett.
Mm-hmm.
And from back of the yards, I was 2 buses and a train. It would take me 40 minutes to an hour to get to school and back. But because our neighborhood school at the time was either Kelly or Tilden, and our teachers telling us not to go there, right?
Yeah.
So I went out of the neighborhood for high school for that reason.
How were you able to do that, or just curious?
Yeah, it started. I had to, the principal really supported me in that quest. I actually was.
Hold on, bro.
Yeah.
The jukebox turns on.
Yeah, no.
There's a ghost here.
The ghost can jam. Well, that ghost has good taste.
Put that one on for you, bro.
Yeah.
Do you believe in that stuff or no?
I mean,
I'll show you a video.
yeah.
It'll make you believe.
Órale.
I have it here.
Órale.
Yeah, I used to have a bar. We used to have a bartender here, and she used to always say, like, no, like, hay alguien atrás. I'm like, no, there's not. Like, I'm here all the time by myself. Like, there's nothing here. And then I was doing something in the back one time, and something happened, and I was like, man, that's weird. Like, how did that happen? And then so I have the security cameras. So and one day I was like, let me check the camera.
Yeah.
That week, and I checked the camera, and I have the footage, and it's just weird what happened. And then after that, like little stuff here happen here, but nothing like scary. And like and I didn't show it to nobody else. Like no one knows this. That I'm not telling it on the podcast. So I only showed it to one of the security guards because I know he's not scared.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, just don't tell the bartenders because
They'll
they're gonna be fucking freaking out. I don't think they watch my podcast anyway. So it's there.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude. So like random little things will happen like that. But the jukebox, yeah, all of a sudden.
Well, the house where I grew up in back of the yards was like, it's a wooden frame that was built in the early 1900s, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we had that scary attic.
Yeah.
And my sister used to always say that she had a ghost that followed her. I think so. I have a different relationship, I think, for me with ghosts, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
I think how can I put this? I'm not afraid of ghosts. I think people are more dangerous.
Yeah, that's true.
I
think once you deal with people, like
exactly.
stuff, yeah, you start realizing, like, like,
yeah, what's a ghost gonna do?
Yeah, exactly.
I think more than anything, but I also know that having studied psychology, that the mind is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of like, I don't know if there's spirits out there. I'm a big proponent of and believer of Dia de los Muertos and of celebrating and keeping the memories alive of those.
Yeah.
But I always say, man, it would honestly, like, I would love to be able to meet a ghost, because to me, like, I'm a history buff. I have all kinds of questions.
Right.
Like, what have you seen? Where have you been?
Yeah.
But I've never. I think maybe as a child, I think I've had situations where, like, could be interpreted as something being there.
Yeah.
But as an adult, I haven't really had any experience. I know a guy who's a ghost hunter.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude, you gotta introduce me to him. I
will.
want for October. I
Yeah.
wanna so a while back I did like people that had I had experiences. So this is one thing I found out. People talk about it, but they won't talk about like the real ones on camera.
Yeah.
So like a couple of people, they told me like, hey, like I'll talk about this stuff, certain stuff, but I can't talk about other stuff because that business is still there, or that place is still there, or I know who lives there. I mean, stuff like that. But dude, like they told me a couple when they were like, I was like, holy cow. But yeah, so I wanted to get a ghost hunter, but I've never been able to.
I'll introduce you.
This
he's a total normal guy, so it's not like but that's just something that he does as a hobby. But he's got all these equipment and everything. And,
we gotta bring him in here.
Yeah, I'll introduce him. You're a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So quick story on the building here. So the building here, I'll take you to the basement so you could see it. It's a regular basement, and then it's like stairs, and it's like a little sub basement. It's weird. And then what it is if you look at the wall, you could see like where it's like bricked. Like, so basically what it was is this back part was where the actual building was before, because the street over there was lower. Yeah. And then when they raised the street, they raised the building, and they raised everything. And so it's like, you know how like in Pilsen or like, like where they have where the original one was the actual one. So like that's what happened here. So like the old part is like where we sit on, and like the newer part is that part over there.
Nice.
And then even like upstairs, it's vacant. And upstairs, it used to be they used to rent rooms. So it wasn't an apartment. It used to be like where they used to rent rooms.
Yeah.
And it's right now it's all gutted. It's all empty. But you go up there sometimes, and even during the day, like you'll get like a weird feeling. Like, you'll just get like a feeling.
It's that aura.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for the same reason. So one of my favorite places to go in the world, like the one I've never been to Oaxaca, but that's on my to-do list, just because and Michoacan, and particularly in Janitzio, where they do the whole Dia de los Muertos thing.
Yeah.
But in lieu of that is, I've been to New Orleans a bunch of times, and a lot of people like going to Vegas. For me, New Orleans is my city because
I've been wanting to go. New
Orleans. I love it. It's the people, the partying, the food, the culture, but they have this culture around death as well, similar to Mexicans with the Dia de los Muertos, but it's the voodoo culture, right?
Right.
And so there's a lot of like haunted tours and haunted houses and stuff, but ironically for me, the reason that I go, though, the number one thing that I do whenever I go is there's a New Orleans cigar factory. One, because I like to enjoy a good cigar once in a while.
Yeah.
But the building where the cigar factory is, previously there, it's made out of brick now, but previously there was wood structures there. There was a big fire, transferred from the Spanish to the French to the Spanish, but at one point, in the location where the cigar factory currently is, Benito Juarez, the first indigenous Mexican president, worked there as an attorney.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and even was in exile there, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but if I'm not mistaken, he even wrote the Plan de Ayutla out of there in New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when Napoleon, kind of put in Maximilian as the emperor there, Benito Juarez was fighting, the war, and one of the places where he lived and worked was in New Orleans.
No
so
shit.
It's pretty cool. So I go there to enjoy a cigar and take in the aura. Like, I feel like, his essence and the presence is certainly felt there. And to me, like, I just being in the space where a historical figure like him at some point was, to me, that's everything. So even though I've never seen Benito Juarez's ghost.
Yeah. I
can feel the essence of it. Yeah, for sure.
That's dope.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, so back to back to the community and stuff like that. So you went to Kennedy, you said?
Yeah.
And then after that, like when you were in high school, like was there something like you wanted to do, or?
Yeah. I want to be a musician and a soccer player. That was my goals.
All right.
I actually in high school I was in a banda, right? And in the neighborhood I was playing a marimba ensemble.
Uh-huh.
And so I really fell in love with music. And I ended up, going to Columbia College to study sound engineering.
Oh.
And music. So So I was doing both while I was there. Um, I came to a realization that that wasn't the life that I wanted to live. That's not what I wanted to study, and so I ended up doing different. I transferred and ended up finishing my studies at UIC at
Okay.
University of Illinois Chicago with a degree in psychology and Latin American Latino studies. But in between, so while I was at Columbia, I did a student exchange in Guadalajara, and while I was over there studying music, I actually tried out for soccer team, and I got to play with like the Fuerzas Básicas Tecos.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I was there and got to play soccer, and live my dream.
Uh-huh.
But same thing. Unfortunately, I came to a realization that was the highest I was gonna make it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I needed to finish school. I came back to Chicago, did a semester at Daily, and then transferred to UIC. But yeah, I mean, I was able to do both. I was, that's one of the cool things that I
Yeah.
can say that I was technically a professional. Didn't get paid much, but
Right.
got to play a little soccer and get a little cash out of that.
That's cool.
And then, as a musician, I was able to record, some albums with the marimba ensemble
Uh-huh.
and yeah, so I got to be a recording artist and a soccer player
and a professional athlete.
right
Check off the list.
But I came to a realization that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I think I didn't really understand this fully until later on as an adult. But I think really what I wanted to do was I wanted to be an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what that was.
Right.
I was just looking ways to. I didn't want to be an employee. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to start things from scratch.
Mhm.
I was able to do that through soccer. I started a soccer league. I saw an opportunity to start a soccer league in back of the yards, and made some money off of that. And I'm like, okay, this was just an idea, and
Yeah.
I took it and run it. And I'm like, what else can I do? And the coffee thing was always on my mind, but I never thought I was gonna do it, or never knew when I was gonna do it. Right.
So, like, for the coffee, was it like were you always drinking coffee? Like, when you start drinking coffee and when you're like, man, like, all right, this is the coffee I like. This is how I like it, and and you started experimenting with all that stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I grew up around coffee. In the house, we always had coffee. We had Nescafe.
Yeah,
and,
Nescafe instant. Coffee.
the instant coffee.
Yeah.
But it was always around, and that was something that I enjoyed. But I never walked into a coffee shop. I didn't know coffee shops existed until my freshman year of college. Really,
Oh,
that was the first time I walked into a coffee shop.
the coffee bean.
Yeah, at the Jumping Bean.
Oh, the
Yeah.
jumping bean. There we go. The jumping bean.
That was the first one.
I think that's everybody's.
Oh, for sure. And the thing is, like, I always talk to Elazar, the owner, and he tells how when he's opened, because he's from Little Village,
Okay.
and when he first opened up the shop, they're calling him a gentrifier. We're talking about '94.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and I remember walking in there, and then there was another coffee shop closer to me where I really hung out at the most, which was at the time se llamaba Café Teocali.
Okay.
It's where La Mexicana is now on Ashland.
Okay, yeah.
And so I remember going there and really just sitting down, enjoying a cup of coffee. And I used to like to write.
Yeah.
So I would just, on these napkins, I would just write poems and I would leave them there,
Yeah.
And that was my thing, and I would leave them there. I never know if they kept them or not or what they did with them.
There's
but
a book of your poems.
I know, right? Well, ironically, the daughter of the owner, I ended up, crossing paths with her in college, and she worked there as a barista / bartender.
Yeah.
Not a bartender, waitress, barista.
Yeah.
And so I asked her, I'm like, and she's like, yeah, I kept them. I don't know where they are now, but like she actually had kept them. But yeah, and that's really what inspired me, because for me, what that coffee house represented was a safe space where I can express myself, where I can meet with people, discuss ideas. It was kind of like this space where just my mind was able to like go all over the place and be creative. And so I wanted that for my community. And I thought, why don't we have something like that in Back of the Yards?
Yeah.
And that was my biggest inspiration. So Jumping Bean was really my first, place that I enjoyed a cup of coffee. but Tocali was really where this whole idea, this concept of a coffee house really was birthed.
Mm-hmm.
And fast forward, I really got into coffee, and the idea of a coffee shop really materialized in 2007.
Okay.
And I opened my first coffee shop in 2008 with a friend from the neighborhood. We shopped around. We bought a shop that was already kind of started. It used to be a deli and a grocery store, like an Italian deli and grocery store on Western and Taylor. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. Part of it was because, I didn't, I wrote a little business plan, but it was, I didn't stick to it. And it was more, I didn't really understand it. It was more me just kind of writing things down because, that's what I read you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But I really didn't follow through with it. I didn't know the community. And by 2010, we closed. But during that process, I really got to appreciate the process of coffee, right? Partnered up with Intelligentsia, who provided us the coffee at the time, and I took advantage of really learning, taking classes that they offered, about how to be a barista, because I wanted to learn how to do latte art, and
Yeah.
I wanted to be fancy, and well, it turns out, and again, Elazar from Jumping Bean would disagree, but like in order for you to do a good latte,
Mm-hmm.
if you can't do latte art with the way you froth the milk, you burnt the milk and you didn't do it right. So the only way you can do a latte art is by frothing the milk correctly.
Okay.
So to me, if it takes the same amount of time to get a latte with or without art.
Yeah.
But to me, is if they're not doing the latte art, they're probably not warming up the milk correctly.
Okay.
And what it does is when you do it the right way, the fat in the milk turns into sugars. So it's not super sweet, but it got a subtle sweetness to it that you can enjoy a good latte where you don't need any sugar. And that's kind of where I started appreciating it. I started learning about different coffee beans, from different regions.
Yeah.
And really learned the art and the science and the culture around coffee, thanks to that experience. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna ask for art on my
That make sure if you go to a place and they don't do latte art,
yeah,
they're probably not frothing the milk correctly.
Okay.
Except for Jumping Bean, I'll give him that because that's so the owner Elazar's spiel is that like I don't like any of that frou stuff. Just people just want a good cup of coffee and they want it fast.
Yeah.
And I get that, but it takes the same amount of time for latte.
Yeah.
To do with art or not. It's just you add a little extra care and to me it's a quality control thing.
Yeah. I like that. Mm-hmm. So so when you did your business plan and all that other stuff, was it something that you just wrote or did you like Google it or what did you do?
A little bit of both, and I'll be honest with you, I still, my business plan is a living document, so I still adjust it and I still read it because it helps me go back to why I started the business in the first place.
Yes,
right?
I agree 100%.
But there's two parts to the business plan. It's the written portion, but it's also the financial portion, right? And so my business plan, when I first wrote it, was this imaginary thing, right? It's like based on numbers that I think we could do, right?
But that's how all business plans
are. Of course, yeah. Any projections is that what it is? It's an educated guess, right?
Right.
Well, it's a guess. You want it to be educated and you want it to be based on real numbers.
Yeah.
And we did that. We looked at numbers from other businesses. We based it on our research. So that's one of the things that I pride myself is having that background in research from studying psychology and Latino studies has really helped me, be where I'm at with the business because I think that's I say this all the time. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that doesn't mean that because you plan, you're not gonna fail, right?
Right.
But that's another saying I say, like, failure is a privilege. When you have the ability to make mistakes, that's where you learn from, right?
Yeah.
And I honestly been privileged to be able to make those mistakes. And that business plan that we have now, that we operate out of, is a product of those failures that I had in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to fail again,
Right.
So I know what that felt like. I know what that looked like.
How long was that shop open for?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years, yeah. And towards the end of it, I just kind of like, I just kind of just let it go, and I'm not proud of that. But part of it was I didn't do my research. I didn't know the community. I know back of the yards. I didn't know, and even when back in the years, I didn't know if people were gonna want, a fancy coffee house in the neighborhood, right?
Right.
I don't know if people are gonna be afraid of gentrification, because oftentimes coffee shops are the first visible sign of gentrification.
They used to say, well, I don't know if it's true now, but they used to say if in real estate, if a Starbucks was opening, real estate, the value of real estate would go up, like jump up.
Yeah.
And that was like the biggest sign. Like if you had a Starbucks in a neighborhood, like that was it. Like that neighborhood was coming up already.
Well, and here's why I think, and this is one thing that differentiates us, right, from like the Starbucks, is that like Starbucks also, I mean, they also do their research, right?
Yeah.
But there's certain factors that they look at, and one of the factors that they look at is median income. Typically, where Starbucks goes, you have median income of 6 figures or above, because coffee to them and to most is a what do you call it?
It's a luxury.
It's a luxury, right? But one thing that I learned was, so back of the yards, the median income is 38,000 per household, meaning in some cases multiple incomes per household, and 38,000 is the median income. Yet people were still at our door. Like when we opened up, we had a line out the door.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, what did Starbucks miss, right? Why, and to your point of like when Starbucks moves in, it's a sign of gentrification, because they're starting to see the dollars and signs. But what I found out, it piqued my curiosity, and we did some research, right? And so I found out that Latinos drink more coffee than any other ethnicity in the U.S. 69% of Latinos drink at least 1 cup of coffee a day. And then the second place is Caucasian at 58%. So we're talking about 11-point difference.
Yeah.
Now, Starbucks is marketing mostly to the Caucasian community,
right?
Because, if you go to an affluent community, it's typically Caucasian,
right,
or they're moving in, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, why aren't they going to our communities? Because before I did that research, I wanted to know why. We mapped out where all the coffee shops were in the state of Chicago, areas that were high concentration of Latinos in the southwest and northwest side.
Yeah.
There just wasn't any coffee shops. And then I thought, well, that's Chicago. Let me do the same thing for the top 10 cities with high concentration of Latinos. It's almost like they avoided us. You know how like think about this like a school of fish kind of swimming.
Yeah.
And you get you drop something or something goes in the middle, they just kind of open up.
Right.
That's kind of how the map looked. And that's why I piqued my interest, and I found out that we drink a lot of coffee. The problem is our communities don't have high median income. So they don't see an interest in coming into those communities. So they're missing the mark. And I think that's what opened an opportunity for us. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go to these places that have high concentration of Latinos and offer a safe space, offer employment, and offer quality coffee. And I think we've been blessed that our reputation precedes us, right? And so people know that we're not gentrifiers, or we're not signaling gentrification, but quite the opposite. We're helping build community by offering jobs that are living wage, and safe spaces for the community. And then we also give back, from the money that we take in, we reinvest back into the community.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the differentiator, right? But really, but to your point of how Starbucks is, I mean, they're moving into places where either there's already a community that's affluent, or they see the trend of moving in.
Right.
So that's why when people see Starbucks moving in, they think gentrification, rightly so.
That's interesting, bro.
Yeah.
Like I never thought. Well, I never knew all that.
Yeah. It's research, man.
And so Studio 63 coffee shop is coming.
There you go.
Coming soon.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, we target the same market.
Yeah, honestly, like again, I'm a bar, but I try to. My whole thing is to a safe space where everybody could come and enjoy themselves.
Exactly.
And not that I target Latinos, but you know what I mean. Like everything we do and we play and what we serve and everything else is predominantly for Latinos.
Yeah, and honestly, like the coffee shops are like a bar that opens at 6 a.m.
Yeah, and basically like. When we go back to like what you were saying with the stats and everything, in regards to like who drinks it and everything else, I feel like we're a minority, but we're a big buying power.
Yep.
Like, dude, like there's a reason why like certain companies, target us. It's not because they know where the money's coming from,
and we spend that money.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like we have over $2 trillion in buying power.
Yeah.
We're a young community. I think average age is like 27.
Because we're still second generation.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then I remember, so when I used to work at State Farm. I remember State Farm for a while, like they were getting into it, like where they wanted Latinos. And now they're like Allstate and all those other companies are like realizing like, man, we fucked up. Like we never targeted the Latino community.
Yep.
And they're a big, and we should have been targeting them also. Because at the end of the day, like they're big companies, dude. They could spread the love around to everybody,
right?
And they just don't. I remember I met this guy from California, and he used to tell me that all the time when I first started with the insurance. And he would tell me, he's like, "Look, bro, he's like, never put your because I would work for companies or like the brokerage, but he's like, you gotta if you work for somebody." You got to put your name out there. Don't advertise the company name. Advertise your name. And if it is your name, your company, advertise it, to los Latinos, like you're Latino owned. He goes, because at the end of the day, like, and give back to the community. Because his whole thing was that all these companies come into our neighborhoods, make all this money, especially these big corporations, but they don't give back. They just take. You know what I mean? Exactly. And that's where you have to be the difference. You have to, if you're gonna make money off a community, you have to give back to it.
Exactly.
And I feel like, and not saying anything about anybody, but like a lot of other entrepreneurs that maybe came before us that were from our community, some of them came back, but not as much as they took. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like those, like our community, like Back of the Yards, Pilsen, La Villita, all those communities, you know what I mean? And maybe they just didn't know, you know what I mean? Because they were first generation. They barely started. So they, that was something that they, what is it called? Charity and all that other stuff wasn't something that was inculcado in them, you know what I mean? Right. But now, like, we have people like you in the community that gives back. Like, that's a big deal, you know what I mean? And the big companies are going to notice that, and they're going to know that they have to give back to us if we're going to be giving them this money.
Exactly. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. Yeah. I think one of the things is the Jeff Bezos of the world, the Elon Musk, they're taking all this money in, but they're never going to spend it in their lifetime, right? Oh. And so for me, we have this philosophy that we call SEED, which stands for social impact, economic development, environmental responsibility, and direct relationships. So everything that we do in our business is tied to one or all four of those pillars. Yeah. And the reason we do that is, one, it's because, everybody should, right? We should be caring about our community. We should be caring about, developing, we can't, I think Cesar Chavez, I'm going to butcher his quote, but he said something like, you can't just think about, progress and prosperity for yourself. It has to include the community because it gets lonely. You can't do it by yourself. Yeah. You have to, raise as you climb, lift as you climb. Yeah. And so, but you don't, and part of it is certainly altruistic. But it's also like makes business sense. Like for us, we are successful and we're, financially, doing well because of that. So it's like, it's not just to do it for altruistic purposes, but it also has economic, consequences, right? I think, we're opening up in Pilsen, for example, and people in Pilsen, and rightly so, whenever there's a new business coming in, people are tend to be scared, right? Because, who are these people? Where are they coming from, right?
Yeah.
And so, recent article that came out, saying that we're, going to be opening up a second location in Pilsen, like 95% of the comments, were positive. And again, because I think our reputation precedes us, some of the like the negative comments were like, one of our employees was, not as welcoming as we would have hoped.
Yeah.
But, but part of it is, because we're hiring people from the community who don't have work experience or work ethic, it takes some time to kind of train them and get them in the, we're also learning how to do that as well. But that's happening because it's people from the community. It's not outsiders,
Yeah.
And I think, we want to change the way people do business. The pandemic certainly showed that if you don't support the businesses that you like or that you enjoy, they're not going to be there at the end of the pandemic. And so, I always, talk about, we got to support local businesses, support, Latinx owned businesses, support women owned businesses, support black owned businesses, not because we're saying don't go to these other businesses,
Right.
but because, we need support. We don't have all the resources sometimes. If we fail, I mentioned earlier how failure is a privilege. Sometimes we don't have that privilege to fail.
No.
We fail once and it's over. It's done.
Yeah.
One mistake and we're done.
Yeah.
And so, so we got to support, our community. And just like our community supports us, we do the same in return. And again, it's not just for altruistic purposes. It makes financial sense.
Right.
It's good business, to give back and not in this vague sense, like Starbucks, one of the things they, sometimes they market that, they give, 100,000 new coffee trees to Chiapas, right? And they show this beautiful picture of these little trees kind of going anywhere. But when you go out there, the reality is it's this collective or for-profit business that gets these trees, right? And then they sell them at a lower price to the farmers. They don't give it to them. They sell them at a lower price. So now the farmers are indebted to them. So now the coffee they sell to them, and then it goes back to Starbucks.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to let's work with you. Let's make sure that you have, an agronomist that's going to help you figure out, you're going to pay a little bit more for these trees, but you can sell to whoever you want. And you're going to have much better prices on your coffee. And they don't tell that story. Right. So it's not just about kind of just, aimlessly giving away. It's about really having a focus. And for us, aside from working, with farmers, at Origin, we also work with the community. Like the community around Starbucks also needs help. There's homelessness, there's unemployment, there's violence. We have a responsibility to our local community.
Yeah. Now that when you open up the one in the back of the yards, do you see like people like you that would come in and just like sit there and like chill, like that's their safe space?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's people that just come in like, when it hit me that, we made it was when the people that were coming in were people that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing, to get support from your community and your friends and people that know you and that support you. But it was people that you had no idea who they were prior to them coming in, and they become regular customers, But yeah, I see that all the time. We have, people writing. We've had artists. We've had musicians come in. We have people that, like, some famous folks that were coming from out of town. They make a stop, in Back of the Arts Coffee. And so, so all those things, I think, it shows that, we're definitely doing what we set out to do.
Yeah. So, can you talk about future projects that we know about? Or?
Yeah.
So all right. So so you're open. Where in Pilsen are you open?
So there's a development called Mural Park, and it's these two buildings that flank what's going to be a park. And the idea behind this is the developers there really want to support the artist community in Pilsen.
Okay.
So we're actually not paying rent.
Nice.
I mean, we are paying a monthly fee. I guess you could qualify as rent, but it's way below market, value. But 100% of those proceeds are going towards, the artist community. And so this isn't something that we're doing. This is something that the developers are doing, and so we're happy to be part of that. It's been 2 years in the making. We were going to do this in March of 2020, and as you can remember, what happened?
Yeah.
They were very good about being patient with us, and so now we're moving towards that. And so it's a nice big space. It's much bigger than our first location. There's plenty of seating area. It's a building. The building where we're at is there's offices and co-working spaces.
Okay.
And a couple of businesses there. Five Rabbit Cerveceria is going to be on the other side.
So that's where they're going.
Yeah.
I don't know if they closed over here. I was just talking to someone about that.
Yeah, they closed this
in
one
Bedford
over here.
Park. Yeah.
So we're on the same page again. They're the same customer base, right? And
yeah.
And then across the street, the other building is fully housed with Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So for us, it's a great opportunity to be inside the neighborhood, and with all the employees that are going to be working out of those two spaces, definitely help feed kind of the shop.
What did your parents think about the coffee shop when you first got it, or when you told about it?
Yeah, they love it. So my dad passed away right when shortly thereafter when we opened up, and
sorry to hear that.
but he was very proud of it. My mom, she won't drink any other coffee if it's not, back of the yards at 47th Street Blend. Porque le hace mal. But yeah, she it's like religion. Like even if so she lives with my sister out in what is it? Forest Park, I think. I think that's the name of the suburb. And so I sent her a 5-pound bag because if she runs out of coffee, she freaks out because she drinks it in the morning when she wakes up. Yeah. And at night before going to bed. Yeah. So she loves it. They're big supporters. All my family, are supporters. But one thing's funny though, I mentioned earlier how we grew up with Nescafe, and when I first started the business, none of them owned a coffee machine. Now they all have coffee machine. They all drink, back of the arts coffee. Yeah. And even my sister that lives out in Urbana-Champaign, she's on our coffee club. So every week we send her a box with coffee. And she also orders our Café de Olla syrup. So they're our biggest fans. Yeah.
How did you so all your stuff comes from Mexico, right? All your coffee?
So part of it comes from Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have direct relationships with farmers in Mexico, but we buy coffee from Brazil, from Ethiopia.
How did you get those relationships in Mexico?
So it's funny. So the Mexican relationship happened because so I have a really bad indoor allergies. So dust, and it's really bad for you. So especially in the winter, I get really bad allergies, right? So I hired a clean lady who would come and help me once every 2 weeks, just to basically do a full kind of cleaning, making sure there was no dust. And one time, as we were she was coming in and we are finishing up experimenting with cold brew. She's kind of looking at us as she's kind of getting ready to. We're about to head out to kind of let her do her thing. And as we're leaving, she's like, she asked me, what are you guys working on? And I told her, we're going to start a business, and, we're going to roast coffee, and, we're going to sell it wholesale. At the time, I didn't want to do a coffee shop. I just wanted to roast coffee. And she's like, this is after, she had been working with me for 6 years now. She's like, my family, I'm from Chiapas, and my family, they grow coffee. I was like, what? I did not know this about her.
Yeah.
And she made the connection. We went out there and we started to buy coffee from them. We have direct relationships in Guatemala as well. There's a farm that does, it's called De La Gente. And it's a collective of farms in Guatemala that, and the school where my daughter goes to, they do like an annual like trip over there for their 8th graders.
Okay.
And they go and they learn about the process, and so we have that relationship, and it's funny because my daughter graduated last year and she went to the farm, that I've worked with. But the other one is Honduras. One of the interesting things about that is, in 2017, went to our first coffee expo, and we got there super early. It was in Seattle, and we got there at 8 a.m. So I connected with a coffee roaster that was out there just to kind of, to get to meet them and talk shop. And when I was there, it was all white folks in the it was a cafe with the roaster in the back. And there's a group there of like brown folks, right? And I was like, and we just kept eyeing each other, like, yeah, and I was like, they have to be here for the coffee expo. They have to be, because it's like they're so out of place, we're out of place, And towards the end of like when we're about to, like, I'm not gonna feel comfortable if I don't go up to them and try to talk to them. So, first thing I thought, they have to be farmers, and they're coming in from from Mexico, Central America, and they're trying to sell to this roaster, right? And I was right about that part. But, I went up to him speaking Spanish, and, I had, back of the yards coffee. It just said back of the yards in the front. And before I could even say anything in Spanish, the main guy was like, "You from back of the yards?" And I'm thinking like we had just opened up the shop. I'm like, damn, you already know about our business? We must be doing really good. And he goes, no, the neighborhood. Like, wait, what? Like, who? Like, I'm in Seattle, and this guy knows about back of the yards.
Yeah.
Turns out, in the 70s, his father married a missionary in Honduras, a white missionary that lived in McKinney Park.
Oh,
so they moved out here.
Yeah.
He brought his 2 sons, and at the time, the only school that, had bilingual classes was Seward in back of the yards. So he would take the Damon Bridge. I don't know if you remember it.
The huge bridge.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he used to walk it every morning back and forth, and then after school. And he went to Seward, the same grammar school that I went to. And so we started talking and we became friends. And, this guy has an amazing story. He ended up going to the military, became a CFO, and then a CEO of Fortune 500 companies. And at some point decided, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm just going to, buy a farm in Honduras.
Yeah.
And not, we're not buy actually. His father passed away, and he had property, and he ended up taking that property and developing for coffee, and created a whole community and provided jobs, in Honduras. And now, now we buy coffee from them, and he's the connection from back of the yards, So it's funny how everything kind of just.
So I was about to tell you, bro. Yeah. So I'm kind of like, when it comes to like things like happening for a reason, and like things happening, like even if it's like little things, like you might not realize it later on. You're like, oh shit, like maybe that's why that happened or stuff like that. Like, are you like that? And like now, like listening to you, like, do you realize? Not realize. Like, do you think that like, everything happens for a reason? So, like, you think the universe was helping you out a lot? Like, hey, bro, like, check it out. I'm gonna hook you up here. Or I'm gonna.
I don't know that it helps you, but I think the universe throws you different options.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have to, kind of like the option of, do you go through door A or through door B? Right. Yeah. And as you kind of like, but you have to do certain things to get to those doors, right? You have to prepare yourself.
Yeah.
So that when you get to those doors, you have a better idea of what door to choose. Right. And so that's kind of the way I see it. Like, I think this case, like, something was telling me that I needed to go to Seattle, right, and to go to the coffee expo.
Yeah.
And never would I've thought that I would have met, this guy, and who's now a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
Same with the coffee. Like, I mean, everything. I do think everything happens for a reason, right? But at the end of the day, like, you can't leave it up to chance. You still have to
you still have to
put in the work and
go forward with it. I agree.
So that, to me, that's the biggest thing. But yeah, I think you're right. I think I don't think I was necessarily destined to do anything per se, but I think that I was gifted the ability to to really be able to see or have a vision that then maybe not a lot of people have, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge, because having a vision without having the resources can be quite frustrating.
I think that's the big, yeah, for sure. 100%. I agree with you on that one, where you want to do stuff and just the resources aren't there.
Right.
I think that's what sometimes happens in our community is we have a lot of people that have really good ideas. We just don't have the resources, or we have nowhere to start, or we have no one to like
Exactly.
mentor us and tell us like, hey, you could start here. Like a business plan. Like before, I never thought about business plans. And honestly, when I opened up the insurance brokerage, I had it like in my head, but till I started talking to everybody, like, you need a business plan. Like I'm not gonna listen to you unless you don't have a business plan. And then I'm like, fuck, like, well, I gotta write a business plan. Like I have to do it if I really want to get, go through with it. And then I found a program. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's called Life Plan or Live Plan, LIV Plan. And what it is, it's a software online, and basically all it is you just answer questions, but like question after question after question after question. You punch in numbers, you do it. It took me like a good like 3 weeks to finish everything, and then you put done, and then it just makes a 25-page business plan for you. But you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And
I had something. I had the SBA, which it was a free program, but they don't have that anymore.
No.
And I used that for the written portion, because they had a really great. It made it easy. They asked the questions, you just answer them, and then they reproduce it. So then I copied and pasted it, and then just added my own kind of touch to it. And then just someone shared with me at some point, the financial piece of it, and then. It was a very basic one, and then I modified it to fit what I'm doing, and I share that with people.
Yeah.
I tell them like, look, use this, but plug in the things that are relevant to your business,
right,
and to your situation.
Yeah.
And it basically tells you the entire story and a path that you need to follow.
Yeah.
But you're right. Nobody taught us that.
No. Like. My parents, like, God bless them. You know what I mean? Like, they did the best that they could or that they knew. But like for them, it was like, get a job with the city, with the town, or get this job, and ese te paga bien, te la aseguranza, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, si quieres hacer un negocio, necesitas mucho dinero. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or this and that. And even they had a small business for a while, and it never flourished. But it was because of that, because they wanted to do something, but they didn't know how to do it. And once they got to the point where they got it, they just didn't know what they were doing. You know what I mean? Like, they had no one they had people to tell them or to like give them advice. But sometimes at the same time, if you're stubborn headed and you think you know it all, you know what I mean? Like,
but it's not just that. You just don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I would say it's expensive to be poor.
Yeah.
Like, because think about that. Like, even like as you're, to get a loan from a bank, right? You have to show income.
Yeah.
If you have a higher income, you get a lower rate, right? And if you have a lower income or bad credit, because for whatever reason, you get a higher rate. And so like, there's these real barriers. Also, I'm sure that your parents had. I'm sure, that your parents, if they would have had a business plan, and if they would have known ahead of time that, like, these are the resources that exist. They probably would have been successful, right? But sometimes it's just you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And I think for that reason, people like you and I, like, now we have that responsibility, right?
Right.
And so I think, for me, that's been one of the hardest parts. I'm still trying to build wealth. I'm not wealthy. I have, I think, a successful business that I'm still working on building, right? But the idea is share the wealth of knowledge as well. Invest in other people. Like, when people have ideas like you did at some point, guide them in the right direction. And if you feel like they're worthy of an investment, invest in them. There's even platforms nowadays where we're looking into it, actually. Instead of raising capital from the typical financial institutions or angel investors or venture capitalists, there's new ways of raising money through crowdfunding, where people can invest as little as $100. So you could use that also for your business, but you could use that also to invest in their business as well.
Yeah.
And so the idea is now, using the power of the dollar to really affect our community. I think it's important to pay fair wages. I think for me, I'm a big proponent of raising the minimum wage. And people ask me why. You're a business owner. It's going to cost you more money. Well, when you put more money on the people who actually spend it, that gets money put back into the economy that then they spend in your business.
I think that was a big thing. Like even if you think about it during COVID,
yeah.
I mean, like everybody says that the money trickles down, but it doesn't. Look what happened during COVID. Everything was closed. The economy was taking a shit because all the normal people
weren't spending.
You know what I mean? Like, so they had to pump money into the economy.
Yeah.
Like that. I think that was the biggest, like, that should have been one of the biggest wake-up calls.
I think it was, you're right. I think it exposed, the way, so in a capitalist society, capitalism only works if people are spending, right? And and this is where we live, right? And so for me, it's putting money in the pockets of the people who actually spend it. Elon Musk, Kanye West, and Bezos, they don't need any more money. They have enough for a lifetime and for many lifetimes, right?
Yeah.
I think one is they need to be taxed, get that money, some of that money back into our local governments, and but also, it's the people in the community, the people who are actually spending money. Let's put that money there, right? Make sure that these billionaires that are making all this money off of us, make sure that they're leading and paying their employees well. Yeah. I think that's important. Like, Bezos makes enough money. He can pay his employees $25 an hour and still be profitable.
Right.
And I think, and I think that's where we have to lead. For example, it's been tough on us because, as we're trying to set the tone and set the example, our operation costs are more because we are paying better, but we're setting the example. And I think more people need to do that. Even the tipping kind of, I tip, and I tip well because as a Latino, we have a bad rep for, I don't know why. And so that's always a chip on my shoulder. So I tip at least 25% off, 25%, of whatever I buy. But I'm definitely against it, right? Because it promotes wage theft and discrimination. So like you have a bar, right? And so I guarantee you somebody walks in, they're probably, if you have someone that looks better than the other one, they're going to tip that one more than the other one, right? Why? For looks, not because they're working better or anything like that, right? And so for me is what you started doing at Backyard Coffee, we were collecting all the tips and shared them equally. So if in fact somebody came in and gave somebody else, a bigger tip just for no other reason than they just felt like it, it was shared amongst everyone.
We do that here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's good, so, and I think that's a fair way to do it,
Yeah.
Because
definitely. I remember my first bartending gig. I went in there and the lady was like, and I was like, hey, I'm like, so for the tips, I'm like, do we share them or how do you want to do this? She's like, oh no, I'm keeping all my tips. She goes, you do you and I do me. And I was like, are you sure? I'm like, just because I had barely started, but I knew everybody that I invited that night. And this was, she was an older lady.
Yeah.
Like she was inherited, like the owner that bought that bar had inherited her. She was an older employee from there. And I told her, I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, like, that's cool with me. Dude, at the end of the night, I made a killing that. I remember, like, I had invited all my friends. They had their friends. I'm like, she was pissed. And at the end of the night, I'm like counting my tip. I'm counting all my tips. And she got no tips that night.
Yeah.
And I'm counting my tips and I'm looking at her like you chose this, not me. Like, yeah. I'd rather have both of us working as a team. We all do better that way.
Exactly.
But because we're all on the same page. Because then if you make competition within them,
and unnecessary competition.
Unnecessary competition. Then you have someone that's gonna be thirstier for tips than anybody else, and then that's how you get a lot of other stuff going.
Exactly.
On. So, yeah.
And you get employees fighting each other.
Yeah.
And it's like that's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same for me. Is like I hope to get to a point where we don't need to have a tipping economy. But that's only going to get to like when we're paying fair wages all aboard, and that means instead of offering a $3 or $4 beer, you might have to sell an $8 beer, right? But at the end of the day, you won't be the only one, right? Everybody's doing
Everybody's
it,
gonna
right?
do it. Yeah.
And that's the thing, because when you're doing it by yourself, people are like, I'm not gonna go there. It's $8 beer,
Yeah, I could do that like downtown, but not.
Yeah, right. And see, again, that's the same thing. But why is that, right? Not because the downtown crowd or the bar or the bartender is any better than the bartender here. It's just because is this perceived, thing that people think that they're in a better place than they are here.
Yeah.
And we need to change that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
conversation
Mm-hmm.
on stuff. Yeah, no, like definitely. So you get all the coffee, you open up at Back of the Yards. Now you open up at Pilsen, and then so you have another big project in Back of the Yards coming up too, right?
Yeah. So we bid on a proposal that was released by the city of Chicago, and the stated goal of this proposal was to provide an opportunity to non-traditional developers and investors, right? But the reality is, at the end of the day, they still fall back to the traditional, right? So, they said what they wanted and what were the requirements. We checked every single box and then some. Like, we were, so we had to get a white developer to partner with us because there really wasn't any Latino or Black developer with the kind of experience that the city was requiring. But even then, they agreed to only take 25%, and we would take 75%, right? Ownership. But we also, in our team, we had 2 Latina architects. Less than 1% of all architects in the country are Latina women. We had a Black contractor, engineers who are Black, Brown, Asian, LGBTQ, our landscaping engineers, and designers. So all of the firms that worked with us were either veteran owned, LGBTQ plus owned, Black, Brown, Asian owned, or women owned, 100%. We were the only one that checked all those boxes.
Yeah.
But there was another proposal that had multiple, buildings, not just the scope of work that the city asked for, which is one plot of land. And I actually liked their proposal because it was bigger and wider. We didn't include housing, which the city wanted, but because that's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
We felt that we didn't need it, at least in that plot of land. But they did. So they ended up winning because the city chose them. However, the community overwhelmingly chose us. Like the alderman there, Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor. She basically did a survey from the community, and the community almost 100%, supported us. So there, part of what we were asking for, to do the development, we were also asking for funds from the city, from TIF funds and other funds. And she basically said, well, if Justice, group isn't part of this, I'm not approving it. And so basically forced the city to really sit us down together. And now this other group that won, they also liked what we were proposing. And so it was just a matter of sitting down and collaborating. And so that's essentially what we did. It's a bigger, development. For us, the part that we're doing which is the first part that's getting built, is there's going to be the first floor, Goldblatt's, is going to be a series of small businesses.
That's on 47th and National on the corner, right?
Yeah,
that big building.
47th and National. It's a historical building.
Yeah.
We're gonna take it back to its old glory.
Yeah.
And instead of making it, the top floors are already senior assisted living center. But the entire first floor along 47 is gonna be small local businesses. That's gonna be designed to what I like to call stockyard chic, which is gonna be like this industrial, but with a modern kind of look to it.
Yeah.
And then along Ashton, there's going to be a clinic as well. But we're going to get to own the property where the small businesses are. So that's going to help us accrue wealth. But and 100% of the small businesses that are going to be there are locally owned. So we're going to anchor this development on 47th and Marshfield. So Back of the Arts Coffee is going to be there. We're going to share space there with Araceli's Bakery, which the owner and founder of the bakery is from Back of the Arts as well. And then next to us is going to be a barbershop that's going to be managed by Futurama Beauty School, which is on 47th, and they've been there for forever. And then on the corner is going to be the other anchor, which is going to be La Selva Clothing, which they do, Back of the Arts themed, clothing and accessories and souvenirs.
Yeah.
And it's also locally owned. And then lastly, across the street on 47th, there's going to be a brewery there. Again, also locally owned, 2 floors, 2 stories. The fourth floor is going to be like a brew pub. And then the second floor is going to be like an event space. We want to make it like a small music venue.
Yeah.
Again, 100% locally owned. They're doing the next to the that space. They're gonna have 3 flats that they're gonna rent out, and then on Justine and 47th, which was the original kind of RFP, that's gonna be a multi-unit affordable housing unit building. With the first floor is gonna have a opportunity hub that's gonna have job training. And we're gonna work with them as well. So it's a pretty big plan.
It's huge.
Yeah, and then the Marimba Institute. Oh, and then the other one that they're gonna be doing, I keep forgetting, is there's a rainbow building across the street on Ashland from the Goldblatt's building.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful building that just kind of been kind of sitting in disrepair.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
And so they're gonna bring it back to its old glory with all the details of the wrought iron design. And so that's still going to house Rainbow, but on top of that, along 47th, it may include some other small businesses, and then on the other floors, on the top floors, it might include either housing, the Marimba Institute. Yeah.
How important do you think? So like in that situation where there was already something that was approved, but then the neighborhood said no, like we don't want that. We want what this is. How important do you think it is for neighborhoods? And the reason I ask is because we just had that, well, not me, but that situation in Inglewood where they closed down the Whole Foods and they're going to make it like a Save-A-Lot or something like that. And the people don't want that.
Yeah.
And like, do you think that's really important that the community be able to say like, no, this isn't the business we want. These are the businesses we want because that's because basically that's our money that's going to go towards that.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I think, ironically, that I'm sitting on the other side, but I've always been on the opposite end, right? Of really advocating for what we need in the community, and really, honestly, 47th in Ashland, has just been. It used to be a commercial corridor. People used to come shopping at Goldblatt's, and across the street with the Rainbow Building used to be a Walgreens. And along Ashland and along 47, there were shops where people, I remember the sidewalk sales. People supported these communities, but as they started to leave, as different migrants started coming to the community, the city just kind of forgot about it and left it in disrepair. Like they disinvested from the community. So, this has been 30 years, 40 years in the making. And I think what makes our project unique is that I am from the community, and I have been on the other side, kind of fighting for what the community wants, right? And I've also built relationships, with people from the community. So there's that inherent trust, right? So right now, like, I think I'm the benefactor of trust from the community because, of the work that I've done. But if I don't keep my word, that trust is only going to last so long, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that's happening now because of the work that we've done to really build an infrastructure around, community organizing. I think that developers think that, aldermen, and DPD, from the city of Chicago, I think we can all do a better job of kind of really communicating and working with the neighborhoods to really figuring out what is it they want. Like, l- to literally do urban planning. There's a whole career on that, right? And we have I think it's the Department of Planning and Development, who that's essentially their role, right? I give them props because this whole project, and the reason I even know about the RFP was because they started to hold community meetings once a month during the pandemic, through Zoom, and it's a good beginning, and so it's become a place where the community can vent. They can hear other proposals of what's being done from different city departments or from other developers. But Alderman Taylor is also doing that as well. Like, one of the things that she's been adamant about is that any development that comes into our community needs to get approved by a group that she selected, but they're consistent. Now, it does take time. It slows down the process, but at the end of the day, the end product, I think, is what's important.
Yeah.
And there's ways to speed up the process, but the idea is there really isn't any mechanism to do that citywide. So what the alderman is doing and what DPD is doing, I think, is really helping frame Back of the Yards into what it's going to become. Now, we're not the only development that's happening Back of the Yards. There's other developments as well that are not as open, with the community, but they're finding out very quickly that like, if you don't have a dialogue with the community from the get go, they're gonna have a dialogue with you.
Do you think so? This is my theory, but do you think what really affected Back of the Yards was after they got rid of the Ashland Bridge and all that other stuff, and it just opened stuff up more?
Yeah, the Damon Bridge.
The Damon,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, first the Damon Bridge, they got rid of that, but then I'm saying then after the Damon Bridge,
the Ashland,
the ugly Ashland Bridge. All that
I
stuff?
think so. Yes, well, I think more than anything. So the Damon Bridge, I can tell you that businesses from 47th going south all the way to 87th, they almost 80% of them went down once the bridge closed. There was no access to the 55 into the community, so it really, and so you have most traffic going through Ashland or Western, so that definitely affected. I think as immigrant communities started to move in, even though they were starting business like at Totonicos, and La Internacional and El Güero, businesses that have been there for generations. The fact of the matter is that the people that were moving to the community weren't voting, so elected officials weren't worried about them, and so I think they didn't have to, like. So you take down the Damon Bridge, what are they gonna do about it?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. I remember even, right after they took down the Damon Bridge, they remapped, Back of the Yards. It used to be part of one ward. It then became part of 5. And then the neighborhood institution that was there at the time, the Back of the Yard Neighborhood Council, were the only ones on record to say anything about the redistricting. And all they said was, we support the map that divided the community, right? So now you have 5 aldermen who their wards are only getting the tail ends of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, and very small voters. Why would they care about who they were? They're gonna take care of their constituents in the larger parts of the ward.
Yeah,
and then and so I think all of that, including the Ashland Bridge, including the Damon Bridge, little by little, people just kind of forgot about Back of the Yards, and then we started making noise, and we started registering people to vote. In 2010, we started to organizing around the new map, and so people started to listen. We built relationships, and now thankfully, like, even I ran for office in 2011.
I was about to ask you about that. You ran for office, right?
I ran for office. I won't do it again. No. I learned my lesson. That's not my cup of tea, but I still am very involved, and and I'm very proud to say that, like, our campaign had a lot to do with the direction that, the political community in the Southwest side is heading to. Like, not just in Back of the Yards, but like, Senator Celina Villanueva volunteered in my campaign. State Representatives Teresa Ma and Aaron Ortiz, volunteered in my campaign. I built a relationship with, Congressman Chuy Garcia, who's now running for mayor. And our commissioner Almanaya. I used to work for Chuy Garcia, and Almanaya was an intern when I worked with him. So these are relationships that we built, and like I have genuine relationships with them, and these are people that I think are genuinely care about our community. And I think they definitely certainly while they all have their own kind of abilities and they won on their own making. I think it certainly did help kind of the community that we built in back of the yards because nobody else was doing it.
Yeah, for sure. So you have all this other stuff going on. You have all this stuff going on now, bro. Everything else. So there's a couple of questions that I usually ask people. So one thing is for sure, you sitting here today, what advice would you give to yourself back in the day wanting to be a soccer star and a musician when you were in high school?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
No te rajes. Like it's not gonna be easy. You're probably gonna fail, but nobody's gonna take that experience away from you.
Yeah.
And you're gonna learn from that experience. Everything that I've done up until today has led me to where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I think my advice was like, échale ganas. It's gonna be hard, but suck it up and get back going.
Yeah. Who has the best tacos?
That's easy. La Internacional.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Well,
that's what I had to ask.
But it is with a caveat. I always say back of the yards has the best tacos.
Yeah.
Because Totonicos has also different tacos, but they're good.
You know what? Someone brought it up the other day. One of my other guys, he brought it up about that his was one of his was a Totonilco, and we started talking about like the best ones. Honestly, bro, like not to say anything about any of the other ones, for me the best tasting ones are the ones on 47th Street because those are still the original everything.
Yep.
Original, like when you go in there, it's a time capsule.
And even though like they put lettuce and tomato on their tacos, it's like it almost feels like a fresh salad on your taco. Right? It just tastes different. It's good, and the tortillas are good. They make their own tortillas. What I like about La Internacional is that they the simplicity of it. It's real simple. There's no frills. All it is, they use good quality tacos and tortillas that are readily available. El Milagro, and the meat that they use is high quality. They just season it with salt and lemon, and I don't know if you notice this, but they use a really thick, like steel kind of flat, what is it called, flat grill. Yeah. And what they do is, so they put this papel aluminio. They crumble it up to kind of make almost like a border, right? Yeah. And if you watch, whenever you're there cooking, they stack up the meat. So while the bottom is getting grilled, the top is getting smoked. Yeah. And then they move them. So it's like, it's just, they just have it. It's
a science already.
It's a science. It's an art. And they do it right. So for me, anybody I say like in Chicago, in the Chicagoland area, there's a lot of places to eat tacos, and there are places that are decent and they're good. But to me, the best, and they, because they stack it up. Yeah. La Internacional and a Totonicos as well. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool. Bro, thank you for coming. I really appreciate your time. I for sure want to have you on again, bro. After elections, because we know we know what you're gonna say. Everything else, but like, yeah, bro, like I like picking your brain about politics, business, and just like community and all that other stuff. So I appreciate you coming by.
Anytime, man.
All right, bro. Thank you. Salud.
Gracias.